When law enforcement closes its investigation into the Texas church massacre, the media will face a difficult question: whether to seek the release of the video evidence and what to do with it.
God is good. God is good.
First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs routinely recorded its services to share on YouTube.
Breaking news out of Sutherland Springs, Texas.
And cameras were rolling last Sunday as a gunman methodically executed parishioners over the course of 7 minutes. Investigators who've seen the footage call it gut-wrenching. Some gun control advocates believe the public should see it too. Others argue it could tamp down noxious conspiracy theories, such as those surrounding the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School. While Connecticut officials say footage of that shooting may never be released, security video from inside the 1999 Columbine High School shooting was. So far, Texas officials haven't addressed what will happen when they complete their investigation into the church shooting. Whether the media seeks out the footage is another question. Well, I feel the same way as I feel about televising executions. Unfortunately, I think it's something that we should be allowed to see. People always say to me, well, do you want to see that? I said, it's not a question of whether I want to see it. And I'm not speaking as a gun control advocate or an anti-death penalty advocate or a pro-death penalty. Just as a journalist, I think you eventually, not now, but I think these things have to be entered into the record. I was very upset that the U.S. government never released the footage of slipping the body of Osama bin Laden into the ocean or the actual takedown. That is something that I think should be part of the record, the United States history record.
You know, I agree with you, and we've talked about this before. I've generally been in favor of releasing this footage for the reasons you state. I'm troubled by what might happen as a result of this. Unfortunately, we've talked a lot about the copycat effect and the no notoriety folks who've talked about don't identify the shooter any more than necessary. As sick as this sounds, I'm afraid that releasing this kind of footage might end up appealing to people who are thinking of going out and doing this themselves. And I'm really concerned about that. Even though I'm generally in favor of putting this out in the public record, I don't see how we can not put it out on the record, but I'm concerned.
You know, I find these are the kinds of decisions where I hate to have to make a decision because I find a direct conflict between my instincts as a journalist and hopefully my instincts, my empathy as a human being, because I think those are horrible images and one would hope that we don't share them. But I think the question here is not whether we publish or video or show these, but whether the public has a right to have access to them. Very often in the news media, we get these kinds of very gruesome, you know, the beheadings that we saw with ISIS and those kinds of things. But we wouldn't show that. You wouldn't put that on the front page of a newspaper. You wouldn't show that on your news segment here. But the very fact that there is a right to get that, I think, is an important one to maintain. So I find myself very conflicted about this. I wish there was a period of time you could say that in 5 years this would be available for viewing, but I don't think it should always be withheld.
Yeah, I think these kind of calls need to be made on a case-by-case basis. I mean, I remember 1981 was doing a story about a horrific tragedy in which 3 generations of a local family were killed by a drunken teenager who broadsided their car in Hyde Park on Christmas Eve. It might have been Christmas Day. And I went to get photos from the Herald Library, and there were photos in there that were police photos from the scene that had never been published. And my attitude toward drunk driving changed permanently the moment I saw those photos. I think back to the controversy over the Danny Pearl execution video, which many news organizations said should never be published. The Boston Phoenix linked to the video from its website. I watched it. It taught me about the nature of this fanaticism and what it was all about in a way that I might not have learned otherwise. Having said that, times have changed here. We've got to take this into account. The Sutherland video, if it becomes public, I guarantee you will be made into a meme, into various disrespectful memes, might wind up as a video game, and I would never want to see that community put through that.
Hopefully you're wrong about that.
It's pornography, right.
Yeah.
So I'm inclined to go with John about case-by-case basis, except that I know in these scenarios we really must have some kind of policy. Because what happens when you get to the case-by-case, then somehow the policy goes out the window. I take your point about right now. I also am concerned about copycats. And I, in fact, think that this guy copycatted from what had just happened in Las Vegas. I believe he saw this or what happened in the other churches, and he thought, this is the way that I will do it, because it doesn't make any sense. What concerns me is that the investigations are not complete. So timing is at issue here. And then I don't know how the policy comes down after the timing. I think I agree with you about the record, but whether it should be released after that, I mean, you know, to know about Columbine now and look at those pictures now,
20 years later.
20 years later, that has some kind of value at this point, but not before then, I don't think.
Could we agree, just don't throw it out on the
Yeah.
web for any creep to
exactly.
appropriate?
Yeah.